Hey everyone, welcome back to Grid Chat. I am your host, Marissa Tandon, and today you are in for a giggle fest because we have a returning guest to help me recap the Miami Grand Prix, Jordan Chapman. You guys have already heard Jordan because she was on the very first episode of this season, which was lovely and perfect, and I was like, why mess up a good thing? Why not just bring back what works? So welcome, Jordan, back to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be back. I love our chats, and I think this is going to be so much fun.
Yeah, I think it's so funny because we were just talking about this catching up, but like Jordan and I are on completely different time zones across the world from each other. And the only reason we are friends is because of the internet and Formula One, which I find to be honestly quite beautiful, to have been able to find each other this way. Um, But because of our time zone differences, the only time we get to actually talk to each other is either if we set up a call like this, or
Like right now.
if like right now, or I wake up almost every day to beautiful little voice notes. And it's like a time delay phone call. So you guys get to be present for our non-time delayed phone call today.
It's like the perfect timing because, especially because I think last time it was really dark and now it's still bright and sunny outside. And so I have like free lighting.
I know, I
So
was like, I can get up in the morning and make this work. Like I think last time last time we were in the middle of the night for you. And I was like, yeah, cool midday would work great for me. I don't like the morning.
the sun just is like, we're not going to set till like 9. It's fine. And I'm like,
Yeah,
this is
forget it.
great.
Love that. Well, speaking of the sun, this week we were in Miami. And as someone who is in Miami, let me tell you, the sun was out. The sun was out.
I can only imagine because last time I was in Miami, I stepped off the plane and I was just sweating instantly.
The thing about Miami and the heat is so important actually for some of the things that we're going to talk about today. So that's why I'm setting the tone for you guys. The heat was the thing about Miami is everywhere inside is freezing. And then as soon as you walk outside, it is like walking into like a steam sauna. It is so
Yeah.
humid and so hot. And so like as soon as you walk outside, it does not matter how nice you look before. It is the second you walk outside. I do not know how all of the, like, celebrities that were posting and everything from the beach club, I would like to know their makeup routine.
I I know a lot of people make fun of them or don't like influencers being there, but I'm like the artistry that goes into making sure that they get the pictures that they want and that they look good. I can't take that away from them because
It's a craft, it's a
you're
craft.
it is. You can't tell me that Madeline White showing up in a Valentino set or Valentino dress, I think she wore, with
Mhm.
her makeup really done really well, and then being out there all day and still looking put together by the end of it, I was like, you know what? That is why she gets paid the big bucks because I couldn't do it. I would be changed into a t-shirt and shorts by about 2 hours in.
I mean, obviously, they're in, like, the air-conditioned paddock the
Yeah.
entire time, and I get that. It's very nice, but all I'm saying is even from the transfer from getting dropped
Yeah.
off by the gate to the paddock, I was melting. I was not on my way to the paddock, but, like, literally from the second you got off the shuttle to trying to get to the gate, like, it was over. I was already disgusting.
'Cause Jedda's hot and, but Jedda's not, sticky like Miami is, so it's just, by the end of the day, you're just melting in the sun, not, melting in the sun plus the humidity, and so I'm props to you for going, and you look like you had a great time, and I loved all of your content, and to anybody who has not seen Marissa's content from Miami, you're missing out. Shameless plug on your behalf because I've enjoyed all of it, and I had major FOMO all weekend because I was just like, "I wanna be in Miami. Can I come?"
Honestly honestly, I people were really hating on Miami before this race. Like, I think that this is the same thing that happens with not so much with Coda. I think, like, people have accepted, like, the Texas race as a race on the calendar that people enjoy, and maybe that's because it's been on for so long. But I have noticed with both Vegas last year and Miami this year,
Yeah.
everyone was talking so much smack. And then both of those races were 2 of the most exciting races in recent memory. It's
And then
almost
now
like they're fun. It's a good time.
what? No. People hate a street track. No, you can't say that.
Boo. Um, And I will say, like, for anyone who's curious about the energy at the track, I have gone to 2 races, that's all I've been able to make it to so far just due to, like, cost and travel, but I did GA for COTA last year, and I bought my tickets resale, but so they were at a steep discount, but I was sat at basically at the finish line, the start finish grandstand this year for Miami, and the experiences are so totally different in terms of like what you can see and what you can do. But the atmosphere at Miami, honestly, like if you're going to enjoy yourself as a fan, I think there's been so much chatter online about the influencers and the celebrities, and they definitely are there and they are doing their thing. And it's not necessarily what the average, or not even not necessarily, it's definitely not what the average person at the race is doing. But I will say the sections that are, like, fan specific, like, in the grandstands, whether you're, like, in the beach grandstands or you're in start finish or turn 18, like, any of those grandstands or even GA, like, the atmosphere of fans was really excited to be there. People who actually, like, love the sport, like, dressed up, like, did different outfits. I saw so many good, like, fandom fits. Definitely nowhere near, like, the level of Japan or something like that, but I don't think there's been a lot of coverage of people talking about, like, the proper fans that were there just to see the race,
Yeah.
and there was so many people that were out just to see the race and, like, have a really good time and braving the heat, so, I don't know, I think it's getting a lot of flack due to the fact that all of the focus is on the celebrity influencers that were there, but also, little inside secret, not really, just if you were there, you would have known this. A lot of the influencers were in this, like, hard rock,
Yes.
beach, like, club. It is so removed from the track. It's like genuinely like a
It's in the
Vegas
middle,
beach
right?
club. Yeah, so it's weird because on the opposite side of the beach club that you're seeing all of these videos from, like, there's so many videos of these people being like, "Oh my god, there's mermaids on the track," like, "There's a pool on the track," like, all these different things, like, I've seen, like, 3 or 4 videos of people talking about how expensive the food was, like, all of that
But
kind
that's
of
to be
energy.
split.
Yeah, first of
And
all, it's those videos that they're showing it where they're like, "We paid $300 for nachos." Like, it's for 10 people. It's $30
yeah.
per person. Still obviously, like, overpriced, but it's, like, sweet food. It's not, and also, like, an average meal in the regular, like, people section where I was, it was, like, 20, 25, $30. Like, it wasn't like I think those videos are being intentionally made to,
They are.
like, for engagement, but those prices were literally for 10 people cabana situations.
And, like, the cabana, like, if you're a brand paying for that, you're paying I saw someone who was working on the side like, on that side of it, they were saying, like, the brands were paying 30 grand for their
Mhm.
place. 30 grand and paying 180 bucks for some nach or 300 bucks, however much it was for the nachos.
Yeah.
That is, like, pocket change at that point.
Yeah, it
Like,
was, like,
no
nothing.
one cares.
It was
And
nothing.
it's not like that's coming out of any of their pockets, that's just going right on the brand's tab, and so at that point, this is just a wash.
Yeah. I think those videos were, like, very clearly being made for the wild engagement that they got. I saw one that had, like, 1,000,000 likes. Like, it was, like, very, very wild, and I get it.
I
Like,
need
you
you
do
one of
your thing,
those.
right? I know. But I will say, like, it was in my experience, it was just really isolated. Like, they were in the paddock, they were in hospitality, and they were in this little beach club. And what's weird is that the beach club is like one side of the track, right? And on the other side of that same section of the track are the beach grandstands. I think
Yeah,
it's the South Beach on that side, and then North Beach is like to the left of the beach club.
yeah,
And the beach grandstands are, like, some of the more affordable grandstand seats and also, like, where a lot of the, every when I was reading so many guides trying to figure out where to sit, every guide
mhm.
was like, "If you're looking for the party, the beach grandstands are where to be." Like,
'Cause didn't they have, like,
so
concerts and stuff? Like,
yeah, so the concerts were in the beach club, but you could, I guess, see them directly from
from
there.
anywhere.
I don't know. I didn't stay for the concerts because they were weirdly placed, and, like, also, it was like watching them on TV. Because if you weren't in the beach club, it was just odd. Ed Sheeran just randomly came on, like, in the middle of the day and
Didn't he
did some
perform last
songs.
year?
I don't know. He did a hot lap this year.
I thought he did last year.
I don't know, maybe he loves F1. Maybe he's like, "I will sing for my supper. I will sing for my tickets." I love that
Wow.
for him, honestly. I would, sure.
It was a crazy weekend, though.
It was. Let's actually get into the race, I guess, because now we've spent like I just complained. I literally was just complaining like, "Oh, all the coverage has been about the influencers." Let me tell you where the influencers were. Um all I want to say is that the all I want to say is that I think that there's not been enough coverage of the fact that like Miami, I think gets a lot of heat because people don't
Yeah.
like the track, people don't like American races. The overall like European fan base of F1 is not interested in the American expansion and they're only covering that part. But there was the fan like space was really cool. I think people were really excited to be there.
I think that's one of the things I've heard most about Miami is, like, the amount of detail they put into the fan experience is something that was unparalleled compared to some of the other races. And, like, I've seen a lot of, like, people who are big and famous say that, like, Gunther said that today.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it's really, really great.
I agree. Anyway, the fan experience at Miami is honestly really good. I really enjoyed myself. There is a lot more walking than I expected there to be. I think the way that it is spread out is so much more massive than you realize like looking at the map. So it is hard to like cover the whole thing. I definitely didn't walk the whole track or the whole experience. So I'm sure there are like cool things I missed out on by not doing that, but it literally like I walked 8 to 9 miles every day, and I still don't think
Ooh,
I still know I didn't cover the whole track. So,
that's a
it is
lot.
massive. Yeah, it really is.
And they had stuff in the city as well, so, like, Miami sounds like a great time.
Yeah, I thought they did a lot of really cool fan engagement in the city. It was, again, spread out, like, there was a lot of stuff in Miami Beach, which is super far from the track itself, so if you decide to go, like, picking your hotel, I almost would've if I were to do it again, I almost would've, like, for the days before the race, gotten a hotel in Miami Beach, and then for the days of the race, gotten a hotel close to the shuttle, um,
Oh.
which I think would be a better balance. Like, if you're just going for the race, you don't wanna do any of the other things, like, you're not going early for the activations and stuff, I think staying like, there are 3 different pickups where you can get a free shuttle to the track, like, you don't have to pay for a shuttle pass, you just have to get yourself
Oh.
to the shuttle pickup zone, and honestly, like, I thought it was pretty well managed, like, we didn't really wait for shuttles, I also am the type of person who goes early, like, I don't wanna miss anything, so I'm sure there was a little bit more of a wait if you went later in the day closer to the race, if you're not, like,
You
a
actually
psychopath.
wanted to see F1 Academy? What?
I did.
Oh.
Practice 1 on Friday, they were, like, not open for practice,
Yeah.
you could not go watch. Everything else it was open for, but literally the first, event on Saturday, the track opened at 10 and the event started at 10:25. So you literally had to get inside and run to your seat, like, do not stop, do not pass jail, do not collect $200, like, you had to run.
No bathroom
Um,
breaks,
no.
no
Oh, you
water,
need to
no
pee? I don't
nothing.
think so. That was the main issue. It's like I think overall F1 Academy, which I'll do a full recap episode on F1 Academy following this, but the F1 Academy really did the best they could with what they were given from the track itself. And I think the track management did not understand how much people were there for F1 Academy because
Yeah.
I don't feel like they had enough security like given to them. I don't feel like the times that they were given were like ideal times. Like the Porsche Cup got better times than they did. Um and I get it. It's an older series and everything like that, but genuinely the, there were so many people that were there for F1 Academy specifically and chose to go to this US race over
Yeah.
COTA or over Vegas because F1 Academy was racing this weekend, and I think the track did not realize that. I think F1 Academy did, like, they had really planned
Yeah.
to have, like, all of this access and everything like that, but I don't know.
I think they got lulled a bit,
Yeah.
like, with Jeddah because, like, Jeddah was their first race. I actually saw a lot of people saying that Miami was their inaugural race, and I'm like,
No.
no,
Yeah.
N pause." But, like, I think with Jeddah, like, they also didn't have any security. They had,
Mhm.
like, the bare bone minimum, and it was really weird to watch, but, like, I don't think the activations were the same. And I think they kind of got lulled into a false sense of, like, security of, like, people are because people did show up for them a bit, but it wasn't as much
Yeah.
in Jeddah, but it was also, like, their first race of the season. People weren't really sure if they were gonna be able to watch. The timing was also awful
Yeah.
because you couldn't just see anything. But I think the difference between, like, who was going to Jeddah and who's going to Miami is night and day, and I don't think it's gonna be the same, and I think Barcelona will also be quite similar, so I hope they take this as, like, a learning experience and continue to, like, grow from this because I think they're gonna be great,
Yeah,
and
I
I wanna
really
see them
do.
succeed. So but anyway, sorry.
Anyway, no, it's okay.
You and
I
I can
think
have this conversation for, like, an hour.
I know, same. I'm like, I literally could just talk about F1 Academy for ages. Um, but we can we can instead talk about the F1 Miami race because we had 2, we
Let's
have
do
so
it.
much to get through. We had a sprint race, we had a regular a GP, and honestly, they were both pretty packed action-wise.
They
So,
were.
let's dive in.
Let's
This
do
is
it.
also we're having back-to-back sprint races. We had
Yeah.
one practice session that Charles, I believe, got 2 laps in the first practice session. Um,
Yes, if that.
so like literally very much not a lot in the way of practicing. And then we went right into sprint quali.
I think sprint weekends are always chaotic with how they do the practice things because, like, you either have a like, a really great weekend or your weekend's really crap, and
Yeah.
there's really no in between. You might get lucky if you're switching the setup between practice and sprint quali, but, like, it's hit or miss.
Yeah.
I do appreciate that they gave them that new gap, though, so that it prevents what happened last year in Brazil with Lewis and Charles, like, where you can change the floor setup and stuff because, like, they wouldn't know that from one practice session if you're running too low to the ground, and so I appreciate that slight change.
Yeah, very much agreed. So with this stacked weekend with our quali and with sprint, I think we got such an interesting race weekend. It was so exciting across the board, starting with sprint qualification. But the biggest thing about this weekend, obviously, is Max. Like, this, I think we looked at just like kind of the high note, I think, and we'll go through all the details, obviously, like we always do. But the highline note for me this race is that this is the second GP that Max has not won this season. And the first
Yeah.
was due to like obviously his car caught fire malfunction in Australia. And I think that made all of us kind of talk about like, oh, like maybe Max can, have some car troubles for a couple of races just to make things interesting. But then I'll be honest, this race, we were looking at like the overall single lap performance during
Yeah.
qualifications. We're looking at like the race itself and the fact that Lando won. These were not due to like car malfunctions. This is well,
He had the hole in the floor. Like, his whole weekend was off.
yeah.
He made a mistake, and, like, his whole weekend was just off. Like, I don't know what was going on. I agree with that. I was just like,
Yeah. But I think what's interesting, because I know people are gonna be like, "Oh, he had a hole in the floor." But also, to be honest
"Yeah,
with you, I think Max himself really isn't pushing that narrative about having the hole in the ground. The hole in the ground, the hole in the floor. Like Max really the one thing I will say about Max is that I feel like he very much was like, "Yeah, I lost this race." Like when we get into the actual
yeah."
Grand Prix, obviously he won the sprint, but like he very much was like, "Yeah, I lost this race."
But he
Some
didn't even win the sprint by that far. Like, that was kind of when I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be an interesting weekend because normally he's, like, 7, 8 seconds ahead of everybody by the end of the sprint, and you're just like, "Okay, that was 20 laps of my life I will never get back."
Yeah, with quali, that was when I really started to be like, I think this weekend's gonna be different because that single
Yeah.
lap pace between Red Bulls, like both of them, and not just Max and the rest of the field is really closing. Like it's not this
Yeah.
multiple large gap that we're used to seeing.
I'm interested to see, like, the McLaren pace with Oscar in that car
Yeah.
because, like, as much as Lando did a really great job, Oscar also did a really good job until he kinda got messed up with the whole safety car in that race. We can talk
Yeah.
about this later. But, like, I said it last year that I think the Oscar will win before Lando. I was wrong because of this weekend, but I still stand by I think he'll put in a win either this year or early next year if that McLaren has a lot of pace, because I think he's figured out the tire management situation.
I think he has, and McLaren brought a lot of upgrades, which I will be honest, we
He
didn't
only had
see.
half. He was only like he was running ahead of a Ferrari and leading that race with only half the upgrades that Lando had.
Yeah, and I think when we are looking at the sprint itself, what was interesting was that like the McLarens themselves were not that high in terms of
No.
qualifications. Another big point for like this Red Bull Max gap closing, like Danny Rick was P4 and it was not
Yeah, that
a
was
large
nuts.
gap. It was like half a second.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a large
that was
gap, but,
crazy to
like,
me.
it just wasn't, like it's not this, like, large second, like, Charles was within a tenth of Max's
Yeah,
pace, Danny Rick was within half a second, and he was 4th, like, we're closer to that gap that we're used to seeing prior to this, like, era of dominance with Max, where it's, like, everybody's coming in, like, in hundredths of a second, tenths of a second,
yeah,
like, it's a big deal.
yeah, and I think next year will be very interesting as well with that because, like, if we're already at that place now, where are we gonna be in a year? Certain people leaving certain teams and not working on the car.
One of my most insane moments of Miami was I was walking from my grandstand back towards, like, the main part of the track of, like, the area where everything was, and they shut down there's these bridges that you have to walk over
Yeah,
to get over the track. They shut down an entire side, so there was, like, so much people traffic, and it was just, like, security was standing, and I was like, "Oh my god, did, like, someone pass out or is, like, someone whatever?" No, seconds later, Adrian Newey came down the stairs with, like, a four-person security team, and I literally said out loud, "Holy shit, that's Adrian Newey." And it
to
was
be fair,
so
that is a
funny.
valid reaction.
I was like I was like, "Oh!" But yeah,
Hello.
he had, like, a four-person security team, like, he is the talk of the town.
I think that was also the news of the weekend because even though I think he might be retiring temporarily,
Mhm.
and I think it'll be interesting to see what he does next, whether that just means he goes on his boat and just has a nice rest of his life, or if he comes back and maybe a different color team, but, like, who knows what
Yeah.
he's gonna be up to, but I think that was definitely crazy.
Yeah, I think it was wild. I am intrigued by what Ferrari has, like, rumored to have
Yeah.
offered him because I think that that's, like, a nice middle ground of getting to still, like, do what he loves, but be semi-retired in, like, the position he
Yes.
wants. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I don't
We'll
know.
see. We'll see.
We'll
Who
see.
knows?
Um, and then just to wrap up qualifying, I was so sad for Logan this whole weekend, to be honest with you. But specifically, he got knocked out in Q1, qualified 20th, and like his radio message was just him saying it got bleeped out, but he
Sad.
said, "I'm such a dumb F word." And like I was like, oh man, baby. Like I just felt so bad. I think honestly he just didn't have the pace on the sprint
No.
race. And to be fair, like on sprint quality, like, you've had a couple laps at that point. Like, it's a new track, like, it's not a track they're super familiar with, like, it was
It was
hot.
hot.
It was hot. The weather was changing consistently, like, by the time they were on the track, the track itself was so hot that, like, you're trying to manage tires, like, I think part of the reason why this race was so wild and why this weekend, like, had so much shifting was because of that, like, the
Yeah,
shifting nature of the
for
track
sure.
itself. So, I don't know, I feel bad for him. I was happy for Danny.
It was just a rough weekend for Logan,
Yeah, it really
but
was. But I will say we can talk about the actual sprint race because,
yes.
Logan did have some good work in that, so I was impressed by it.
I think we didn't talk about that enough, like, people have not talked about that enough this weekend.
I agree. I was really surprised to see, like, once I got back on my phone, like, no one was really talking about it, and obviously, like, everything is gonna get buried in Lando's first win, but the sprint like, Logan's sprint race was actually very good. I will say, obviously, he did, outpace Alex, or he did beat Alex in the race itself, but it was partially because Alex did have to start from the pit
Yeah,
lane, with, like he basically during practice, James came out and said after the quali, they had determined that Alex had some like error messages through that they discovered during practice, and the only way that they could fix that for it to count for the GP basically was to do those setup changes between quali and the sprint race, which made him start from the pit lane. However, Logan put in a really good race. Like he really did, but he started all the way in the back and he finished 12th. And I thought he did a great job.
The amount of overtakes that you can do on that track is actually quite limited, and I think that's one
Mhm.
of the interesting things about Miami. Like, you honestly can't overtake everywhere,
Yeah,
but he did such a good drive, and he kept the car on track. There were no blips, and I think it's a sound performance from
I
him, at
agree.
least in, like, the sprint race, so because it's not that long, and to do that many overtakes in that little time was an
Yeah.
imp it's I think that's a significant improvement for him compared to last year.
That's the thing is like I really feel like this year has been so hard to judge the performance of either of
Yes.
the Williams drivers. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
it's just they've had so many issues that have kept them from having a proper like the proper ability to say like this is a good driver, this is a bad driver, these are the issues. Like I really don't think that we've had that in the same way this year.
And, like, even with the repaired chassis that Logan had, like, that he was working with, that wasn't the new one,
Mhm.
like, that's still a repaired chassis. It's not the original one. It's not the one that he has been used to driving. It was Alex's one. It was set up for Alex. And
Yeah.
as much as you can try to fix those things, like, when he did, like, bend the car that one time, I was like, that I don't know how much of that was really him bending the car and also just him being in a brand new spec car. Not brand new spec, but like a very different car than he set up to, and
Yeah.
I don't know.
But yeah, so I just really I did want to give like a little bit of a highlight to Logan because I do feel like his performance in the sprint race, I would have really have loved to have seen what he did in the actual GP if he had not
Yes.
been taken out. So that's that.
Speaking
The
of someone who took them out though,
I know I was gonna
let's talk
say we
about
should
that.
let's talk
Who was
about the
that?
Lewis Hamilton versus Kevin Magnussen adventure that was the sprint race because we've got multiple moments. K-Mag basically in press after was like, "Yeah, I drove that way on purpose because I wanted to be defensive," and which resulted was like which resulted in him getting investigated for unsportsmanlike conduct because the race itself, like there were multiple incidents. It wasn't just one where he did something that was like off. It was like four different incidents. He pushed Lewis off the track. Which was where Yuki was very impressively able to overtake Lewis. We have K-Mag fully skips the chicane, like just drove straight over. Um, and then there were a couple other incidents where it was like I believe he made contact with Lewis at one point. Um,
I think he was moving on to braking as well.
yeah, it was just very intentionally breaking the rules, knowing that he was getting all of these penalties, keeping Lewis from being able to pass. And like it is a team sport. And we've seen Haas be like one of the only teams to properly play it as a team sport from time to time. But my God.
Do you know what the funniest thing about that whole thing is though? They came out this weekend and they're like, K-Mag might not have a seat next year. And I'm like, how do you I'm like, he just sacrificed his whole weekend for you guys, but then you might okay.
Part of me I wonder like is that him trying to be like, "Guys, look what I can do. Look what I do for a teammate willing to help."
To be fair, though, there's better ways to do it than ways that are gonna get you a race ban, because the way
Yeah.
that he's driving, there is no way that he is going to finish this season without hitting 12 penalty points. He has to go until March of 2025
With not one.
without getting 2 penalty points. I'm like,
Out
"You this is that it's not happening." I give it through maybe midway through the season,
I agree. Also,
maybe through the end of the European circuit, but, like
yeah, maybe, I don't know. I especially the way he's been driving, it's like he wants to. He's like, "I'm tired of this." Basically, for anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about, there are points that go on your sort of super license every time you do something bad, right? There are rules to F1. I always joke there's like 4 rules and 20 drivers, and that's why F1 is so easy to get into. And then obviously there are more rules. But I was explaining this to a friend. Actually, I was like, "No, I think you would really like F1 because it's simple. It's simple to get into, and then you can learn all of the other parts later. But if you learn the basics, it's just pretty simple." And I did say I was like, "There's like four rules and 20 guys," and she was like, "You know what? I feel like all sports should have less rules than guys." And I was like, "I think you're right. I think that's that's the
I think that's
basic
fair.
entry point." But one of the as you break these rules, which obviously there are more than four. I'm being facetious, but as you break these rules, you get points against your license. And if like for example, if you watch basketball, like when you have a certain number of flagrant fouls, then you have a automatic game ejection, and a certain number of other situations you can get automatic game suspensions. It's the same in F1. When you do too many points in a 12-month period, they do not reset at the beginning of a season. They run for the whole year. So that's why we're saying he has to get through March of 2025 with no more without receiving two more penalty points. Once you hit those 12 penalty points, you have an automatic race ban, and someone else has got to run the race for you.
Happened to Pierre a few years ago.
Yeah, it did. And we're quite close to Checo having the same issue. So I
Yeah.
think we have two drivers actually on the grid that really need to be careful.
I think Checo comes off later this year, so he's not
Yeah.
as far off as K-Mag. I think his is in the fall, so as long
Yeah,
as he
it's in
doesn't hit
like
anybody and do something like really stupid. But K-Mag is lucky he didn't get more penalty points this weekend.
yeah, he is. He is. Which also, I would say, speaking of penalty points, is probably a good time to talk about this Fernando Lewis incident, which is
Oof.
also
Yes.
ironically like the cause of Lando being out of the race early on, which obviously
Yeah.
turns around for him later. But we have this incident where Lando has contacted the opening lap, which pushes him out of the race. But that was caused by this pile up between Lewis, Fernando, and Lance, which
Yeah.
then by proximity takes Lando out of the race. And Fernando very much feels that the entirety of the problem was Lewis, and he came out and said that he will be speaking to the stewards about this Spanish bias that they have. And I think it's interesting, and it would be a little bit easier to buy with a different driver, I think. I
Yeah.
think Lewis and Fernando have such beef that has really
Yes.
started to, like, be highlighted this season lately. Like,
If it was
they
George,
yeah, if it was George yeah, if it was George and you wanna talk about a British bias, I would actually kind of be a little bit more behind it, but Fernando and Lewis, literally, I'm sometimes, like, wondering if they're gonna fight after the race, like, "Meet me outside." Like, I'm worried about their energy.
like I don't even get how he got there with that. Like I don't know how he like the whole comment that he made didn't really make sense. He was like just I, I was just like you are not a victim right now. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Like I thought he almost was hitting Lance before. Like I watched the replay and it seemed like he was already hitting Lance before Lewis even arrived. He got pinched, obviously.
Sure, he got pinched, but it also feels like if you look at it and again, everybody has their own
True.
opinion on it. I thought watching it, I thought his reaction was quite extreme, is what I will say.
Yeah, I think he was just gripe. I think it's a bit like I'm upset and I'm just wanting to blame someone.
Yeah. Which, like, I get it, but also, I don't know, a hot take, I guess,
Sorry.
from Fernando, and he what I'm curious about, like, because he didn't really go into it, I'm curious with his, like, feeling that it's specifically, like, this British bias, he didn't bring up any other drivers that have experienced the same issue because a lot of the grid's not,
Carlos?
British. Like, Carlos is also a Spanish driver, Checo's a Mexican driver, like, there are multiple other people that I would be curious for him if it was just, like, in the heat of the moment because he obviously had his issues last race as well, like, I wonder if he's just sort of like, "It's me versus the FIA," but I was surprised by it, that's what I'll say.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
What else happened?
The last big thing that I did wanna highlight because I was really impressed by Max's defensive move at the Open because a lot of times we say that Max's races start because he's just able to get out at the front, qualifies on pole, he gets up at the front, and then he just opens the gap the entire race. He did, at the opening of the race, really keep Charles from taking his position back and really fighting
Yeah.
for it because he basically, like, cut across the track
Yeah.
to essentially, like, keep Charles behind him, which kept Charles from being able to take a straight line and go around. So I was impressed by the opening move. It's a good move. Game
It
recognizes
was.
game, as they say.
It was a great move. And like I think Max is developing as a driver and I think he's getting a lot better about like not just kamikazing people and just being like, if you don't move, I will move you
Mhm.
and like properly defending. And I love that. I love that for
Yeah.
him. So
So yeah, I think the sprint was fun to watch, honestly. But it
for
was
sure.
also typical ending, right? We had
Yeah.
Max won, Charles came in second, Checo was in third. Like I was like, "Okay, maybe we're back in for a normal race." Still very exciting, but definitely the race will just be normal again.
I think the only thing I was, excited I'm confused about is, Checo keeps getting 3rd, and,
Mhm.
another car keeps splitting the Red Bulls,
Yeah,
but
which
that's,
I'm
a
intrigued
side
by.
tangent.
No, I agree, but
Yes.
I am intrigued by it because also it's like it seems like Checo has improved overall between last season
Yeah.
and this season, but he's also improved to a point that someone is still beating them, which does make me
Yeah.
wonder, like, as we're seeing these changes in performances, like, is the car not necessarily is the car not that good, because I do think obviously it's a very great, like, very impressive, very powerful car. However, is the car able to be caught up to, because we
Yes.
saw upgrades from, like, multiple teams this season, I mean, this weekend, and both of them, um, improved and got closer. So it's like,
Yeah.
I think there is hope that the rest of the season might be a little bit more
Uh,
interesting. Yeah, a little bit more
I think it'll
exciting.
definitely be closer, but that's a side tangent.
Well, let's dive into the race itself, because I was rewatching, because I was obviously at the race, so I didn't get like all the radio and those types of things. But the the like Logan's radio. I love Logan, as people know. I really I really don't hate anyone on the grid. I was very irritated with Kevin Magnussen this weekend, but I don't really have like hatred in my heart for anyone, which I will be honest with you is very different than the way I approach most sports. If you want to talk about basketball, there are people that I hate, but on principle, you know what I mean? Like,
Me me and soccer, I'm the same way, or
yeah,
football, since I'm in London right now. I'm like,
you're like, I'm gonna. But with F1, I don't know if it's just by nature of there being less of them or by nature of like knowing more facts about their personalities. But I don't have hatred in my heart for anyone. However,
"That's fair."
I do have love for Logan. And I his when I was rewatching like highlights and looking at the race like for at home to recap, I have to tell you, Logan says mate on the radio nonstop, like when he's talking to his engineer. And like he says it in the tone of someone from Florida saying dude. And it is
Mate,
the
kidding
yeah,
me,
he says, like,
please?
"Mate," like, it he says, "Mate, like, what was that?" Like, it's I can't even do it right because I'm not like Logan, I'm not like a
Mate,
a boy from Florida.
mate,
Yeah,
mate,
"Mate,"
like,
like,
what?
"Dude," like, you know?
Mate, why mate, what was my lap time?
Yeah, I'm like it's like something about it, I think it's so funny because obviously he's picked it up from being on a British team, but,
He's
like,
here.
but it's, like, in Miami, like, 20 minutes from where he grew up. I wanted to be like, "Baby, just say dude." Like, I'm desperate to hear him just say dude on the
Bro.
radio, bro, man, any of those. But it's very funny. It was very funny to me. It was basically the radio message was when he got impeded during quali, but like he genuinely said mate, and I was like, it just doesn't sound right. But I love it. I love it.
I could hear it, I can visualize that, so
Yeah, if anybody wants to hear what I'm talking about, if you look up like the highlight reel of that F1 put out of sprint quali, it's one of the first things that's in that. And it's just like this has nothing to do with racing. It's just the funniest thing in the world to me. And the thing that does have to do with racing is he was impeded during qualifying. So I'm gonna put that out there. But that
Poor guy.
he did his best, but really no one wanted him to have anything this weekend. Aside from our boy Logan, who just had a very, very bad day, to be fair. We also had like a huge flip from Daniel Ricciardo in the sprint because we went from
Yeah.
P4 all the way back to the back half of the grid again. And
Then you have that penalty, that what, 5 places?
yeah, a 3 grid penalty from China. So, 3 place penalty, and he just was all the way in the back. It was just not the race for him. But the one thing I did wanna point out is, like, we see so many big, like, flips between the sprint race and the actual GP when we have a sprint weekend, and a lot of that is because they're like, if you watch IndyCar, they refuel during pit stops. Formula 1 runs with the amount of gas that they have the entire time. So, there is no, like, refueling, so you have to carry the amount of fuel you need for the race. I think I've said that 4 different ways now, but hopefully everyone understands.
I definitely didn't understand it, it's fine.
I can say it one more time. No. So the point being that in a sprint race, your car is about like is significantly lighter because you're carrying half the fuel. So a lot of times I think that's part of like the big gaps that we're seeing is these cars are significantly lighter. Danny Rick was running a very much lighter car during the sprint race and during sprint quali than he was here. So
It's not the same, and, like, I think a lot of times, like, the sprint races I think it's really interesting to see just how far people fall just really quickly, and it's night and day for them.
yeah, agreed. So Williams in general obviously had a tough weekend, but the other thing was like Alex was really struggling with the car. And I think one of the things he specifically said was he could only use the soft tires for 6 corners and then he just lost complete traction. So I think I'm wondering how much of Williams' performance this weekend, obviously Logan getting taken out of the race aside, like that's completely separate.
Yeah.
But in terms of like Alex's struggles and in terms of Logan's struggles, like in qualifying in general, it has gotten so hard to judge these Williams
Yeah.
drivers against the car. So I don't know.
'Cause I think last year we saw there was a really big disparity between how Alex was driving the car and how Logan was driving the car, and that was crashes, that was everything, and this year, I don't think it's I agree with that, like, I don't think you can really judge how much or how, like, far apart they are because I don't think they're really I don't think it's either of them, honestly. I think it might
Yeah.
really be the car. And I think it'll be interesting to see, like, who gets signed and who doesn't, who leaves and who doesn't.
I feel like the Williams camp as a whole is aware that a lot of the trouble is the car. And
Yeah.
I think James and also Toto saying like we have no plans to bring Kimmy in early after this weekend feels like they're also aware that it's the car and that there's a lot to do. And so I'm curious like the stuff that we're not privy to, like testing, the work that Logan's doing, the work that Alex is doing, what they're seeing like in between races at base camp and in general, like I am really curious how much Logan is completely off the table for next year or
Yeah.
how much of it is like they are very aware that it's the car, you know?
I don't think he's completely off the table as much as everybody thinks he is. I think it's still very touch and go. I think if, like, the season goes really, really poorly and he can't pull it out at least once or twice, like, then yeah, I think he
Yeah.
might be gone. I think the biggest reason that he would leave or that they would replace him, though, isn't necessarily him being a bad driver. It might be that they need someone with more experience who would come to Williams and help them fix that car, kind of
Yeah.
like how Lewis has done with Mercedes for a bunch of times with his testing, or like why Red Bull continues to keep Checo because I think that's something that people often like glaze over with him. It's like they have kept Checo because Checo is a feedback driver,
Yeah.
especially. Like he will tell you how to make the car really good. And I think that's a difference between like your Checo, your Lewis, and then your George and your Max. They're all very great drivers. They are all doing great for their teams and they'll give good feedback. But there's a difference between having like a really, really seasoned driver and having a younger driver who is not as seasoned and hasn't been through multiple like car development sagas because like Lewis and Checo have both driven in different eras of F1 cars.
Yeah.
And I think there's a very big difference in how you can really nurture a car into something great. And I think that those two bring over someone like a Max and a George who really haven't ever gone through that because they're both this is really the first, maybe second full era of developments that they'll both have done.
Yeah, the other thing I think that was interesting on that same vein was maybe 2 races ago, Fernando said the same thing about Lance being the one who gives more sensitive feedback, which
Yeah.
I thought was interesting because so many people are so adamant that like Lance just is not a team player or these different things and obviously like he does things that make you feel that way like there are there are
Yeah.
often times where he is over the radio or behaving in a way that perhaps is not very sportsmanlike or team player like however it
Yeah.
was interesting to hear Fernando say like Lance is really the one that's like giving that sensitive feedback for the car development and how it's important so I think people bring different levels to the situation and I again am wondering how much of it is um how much of Logan's place is not as, like, finalized as we all seem to think it is.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's for sure.
last thing from qualifying, I just wanted to point out McLarens were not at the top of the field. We really were, like,
No.
in a Red Bull Ferrari situation again.
I thought they were gonna end up, like, midway through the field. I changed McLaren out of my F1 fantasy thing this weekend. I was so upset. I was seething. I literally changed them the day before the race,
Devastating,
and then this
actually.
weekend happened, and I was just like,
What
"Huh."
a move. What a move. I will say, my dad went with me to this race. It was his first race, and we both wore McLaren on Friday. So
You're
I
the
just
good
am
luck charm.
it just might be the case. Me and my dad did it. You're welcome. Um, so getting into the race itself, that
Yep.
opening turn was bonkers.
I think Checo saw his contract flash before his eyes in that moment and was just like, "Let me just turn a little bit more to avoid taking him out, because if not."
I when I saw that, like, I also was watching that, like, on the screen, and then I watched the replay as well, but, like, the entire crowd was like, like, "No," because it was so close. Checo genuinely, like, almost took both of them out right at the top of the race,
Checo was
and
gonna give us what we all really wanted, but also completely just torment himself in the process.
but also, I'm so glad that that didn't happen because the race itself being won in the way that it was is so much more exciting than Max being, like, crashed out by his own teammate, like, for us, that's again, like, I don't wish ill on any of these drivers, even when I'm talking about, like, wanting to see a more competitive field when Max is not there, and I think, like, crashing out in that way would have just sucked because it would have been
Same.
another race where you're just like, "Oh, well, Max couldn't race, so that's why everybody else won."
I honestly think the race result might have been different if that had happened, though.
I
Like,
agree.
as I don't as much as I think Lando would have done really well, I don't think he would have won, like, unless both that had happened and the safety car had happened at the exact same time, but I think in that instance, I think it actually might have been more of a Ferrari kind of win because they had pace all race.
Yeah. I will be
And
controversial with you and say that I think Oscar may have actually won the race
that is
if
true.
Max and Checo had been taken out at the very top of the race. Oscar was already up in 3rd and then very quickly moved into
Yeah.
2nd. So I would say that he and then I think he wouldn't have been further back in the field to have gotten the
Yes.
front wing damage that had to be replaced. So
Yeah.
that's my
I agree with
feeling.
that.
Yeah. I
Like,
think it still would have been a McLaren win, ironically.
I think because like, with Oscar, like, I think if the safety car had come at a different point,
Yeah.
just even a little bit, like, even just, like, if it had come, like, after Lando stopped, I think Oscar actually might have had a decent shot at winning that race over
Yeah.
Lando, but that's just me.
No, I agree. I think and also there was, like there's so many things about the safety car that could have changed, like, what if, what if, what if, which we'll get into Max's feelings about what ifs later, but but I think, like, there were so many drivers and watching it, like, right at the pit lane too is wild. There were so many drivers that pitted maybe a minute or 2 before the safety
Oh,
car. The race would have been so, so different if everyone knew the safety car was coming, obviously, so
and I think
that's
that's
one
the
thing.
crazy thing about safety cars. They're just, like, they're so unpredictable, and you
Yeah.
can't and because you never know unless it's, like, something that's, like, something's on track,
Yeah.
that's, like, a bird or something where everybody would know.
Yeah.
But, like, with the way that that happened, there's no way you could have predicted it
No, it
when it
wasn't
happened.
of course, and, like, that's the other thing, like, I hear people say, like, "Oh, he won, but it's because of the safety car," but it's like safety cars are part of racing, like,
Yeah,
strategizing and knowing how to run your, like, how to run your team and how to run your race and hoping for a safety car. A lot of times we see strategy get messed up because we
yeah.
see strategists being like, "Well, hopefully a safety car will come and we'll get a cheap pit spot," and then they pit way too late. So, I think it's interesting.
I with the Oscar Lando thing, I am actually really surprised that McLaren called Oscar in when they did, considering they left Lando out so far.
Obviously, they didn't know the safety car was coming, so what
It
can they
just
do about
happened the
that?
way it happened, and
Yeah.
but Lando won.
Lando did win. Which also, like, since we're talking about the safety car, let's talk about Kevin Magnussen deciding to ruin everyone's good
Ah,
time and hit
ah.
Logan. I just, like, I he this weekend, I think there is a difference between driving defensively,
Yeah,
driving in a really, like, exciting and fun way, driving for your teammate, and what Kevin Magnussen did this weekend. Like,
it was
it
reckless.
yes, it really was. It really was just like and again, maybe that's because he knew what we know now about Haas saying, like, he may not have a seat next year. Maybe he was just in a mood. Maybe this is his vibe. Maybe he was trying to impress someone. I don't know. But for me, it was really frustrating to watch this weekend because it's like I want to watch I love look, I love defensive driving. I loved when he drove defensively. I really loved that. Like I loved watching that. This was different. Like, I think when you get to the point that you're crashing people off the track, it's, it's not cute anymore. It's not fun to watch.
I remember rewatching the replay of that, like, there was a point where K-Mag should have just braked and just
Yeah.
braked, and it would not have happened, and he's so lucky, and Logan is incredibly lucky that that crash was not worse than it was.
Yeah.
And I fully appreciate that Williams did come on the radio and was like, "It wasn't your fault, it wasn't your fault," because he just gave himself so much, like,
Uh,
crap about it. He was like, "Did I do something wrong?" And I'm like, "You didn't do anything wrong, I'm so sorry."
I listening to that radio, like watching the recap again, I just was like, this is the worst. This is like the worst feeling ever to watch this happen and like to watch him be so devastated. And like again, like he grew up about 30 minutes away from this track. Like your dreams have been realized. And also I think it shows you so much of his mindset of like he's automatically thinking that it was his fault
It's
and
his
like
fault.
trying to figure out what he did wrong. And it just sucked. Sucked to watch.
And he's like, that was he was gonna do a really great overtake. He had secured the overtake as well. Like, he was
Yeah,
past him,
yeah,
which is why K-Mac got the penalty that
yeah,
he did. But it was just hard to watch, and it was just really sad, and I felt for him because I don't think that's how he wanted to go out that weekend. I don't think it's how Williams wanted him to go out, and, like, a lot of people have just been, like, dunking on him, honestly, and being like,
yeah,
"Oh my gosh, well, this is why he's not going to, like, be on the seat anymore," and I'm like, I don't think, like, you can't fault like, you can, but, like, faulting him for a crash that wasn't his fault wouldn't be fair.
yeah, agreed.
Or, like, taking him out of his seat mid-season or whatever people are saying right now, take for this wouldn't be fair.
Yeah, which has been confirmed that's not the case. They're not intending
Yeah,
to take him out of his seat at the next race, and it sucked. But I again, like after seeing his performance on the sprint, really would have loved to have seen what he did with a full race. It just
same.
sucks.
Yeah.
Um, but Lando wins at that cost. Basically, we
Ooh.
get our safety car. Also, the other point that I did want to make about like the change between Max and also with Lando, like everybody saying, it was under a safety car or whatever, but that safety car did restack everybody very, very
Did.
close. It was that restart was very much
Yes.
Max should have been able to overtake him and he didn't.
I was
Um,
very shocked by the restart because normally Max always has well, Max has a really good restart if he's in first, but if
mhm,
he's in second, I've noticed that his safety car restarts are not the strongest.
mhm.
Like, his reaction time is always slower than, like, Charles's reaction time. I was actually surprised that, like, Ferrari didn't pass him on the safety car restart.
Yeah, I was honestly the safety car restart, I think, like, shows that he had the chance to win the race and he didn't.
Yeah.
So and also, like, Lando did defend off he was right behind with, like, the
He
Ferraris were
did.
right behind him. That moment for me is, like, he did earn the win. He didn't just, like, get a
He
cheap pit stop and do his thing.
for sure. Like, he did a really good job, and he was also what was he, 6, 7 seconds ahead, like, in
Yeah,
traditional max form, which also makes me a bit wary not wary in, like, a bad way, but, like, wary of, like, "Ooh, let me just watch and see," of the upcoming pace of that McLaren car with the full upgrades, because this isn't the full upgrades that they're gonna like, their full
yeah.
package for the year. This is a partial package. That's a danger for Red Bull.
Yeah, I I will say one of my favorite things was at the end of the race when they're doing their, like, interviews, like, they did Lando's first, and then they brought Max up, and one of the questions they asked Max is they were like, "Do you think this is the pace of the other cars, like, for the rest of the season or," and he literally said, "I hope not." Like, "I hope not."
It's like, "No?
I was like,
What kind
"Mm."
of question is that?"
It was so funny. No, well, I guess they were saying, like, do you think, like, people are catching up to you, basically? Like, you lost this race, and
Yeah, but
I
still,
it was the
like
way it was asked was, like, very funny to me, but because what was he supposed to say? Like, "Oh, yeah, but, I think we're gonna lose a lot more races this year." Like, there was no genuine answer, but he literally, like, made the funniest face and was just like, "I hope not. I truly hope not."
I appreciate Max's, like, no BS attitude.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the action after the safety car really was, like, really good aggressive racing because you were basically halfway through the race again, so you were restarting with half the time. We got really good moves, there was good action between Oscar and Carlos,
Oof.
Lewis was really moving. Obviously, Oscar had to get a front wing replacement after that exciting action, which was a bummer, but
That torpedoed his race,
it really did.
honestly. I didn't appreciate, back the comments at the end after the race from Carlos. I was like, "It was your fault,
It was.
partially."
But anyway, I will say, I think, like, highlight, obviously, Lando puts an end to no win Norris. Very happy for him. Exciting win. And also, everyone was happy for him. There was not one person who was in
Everyone
a
was
bad mood.
happy.
It was just so
Like,
good.
they were all so pumped. They were like, "Oh my gosh." I did you see the question that someone asked George?
No. What did they ask him?
Oh, one of the reporters asked George, they were like, "How does oh, you're no longer I'm sorry to say that you're no longer the last British race winner." And he was like, "That's a really rude way of saying that Lando won." And I'm like,
Yeah, you know what? A lot of the press questions after were, like, really trying to minimize they were very a lot of the press that I
it's
saw was really,
heartbreak.
like, snappy, like, unnecessarily, Like, there's that, obviously, there was, like, um in the room after, like, in the press room after, which also hilariously, Max sat in the wrong spot. I don't know if you saw this.
Yeah, I
He
did see that. He was like, "Oops."
He was like, "Oh, my bad. Sorry, guys. I'm so used to that being my chair." So
Force of
that
habit.
so funny.
He
But
did not lead the Max Verstappen podcast this
he
weekend.
did not. It was the Lando Norris podcast, truly.
What?
Did you see the footage of him reacting to in
His
the
Checo thing?
yes, the Checo race? He literally looked like
He was like
he had no idea how like close it was. Um, which was wild. Loved it. Loved to see it.
the
um,
shock and the horror of it all. He was just like, "Excuse me, sir,
he
mind
was
your business."
so funny though. Loved it. I loved to see it. And then also, like, in terms of, like, everybody loving Lando, like, once Max and Charles got out of their car, they both waited. They like congratulated him on the track itself. Like, Lewis drove up next to him to, like, cheer for him, which was really cute,
Yeah.
and give him like. And then we also had, like, Danny Rick. I had a really great view of this. Danny Rick was, like, waiting by the garage, and, like, ran out. Like, he, like, waited for Lando to do the things that he needed to
Oh.
do, and, like, ran out and gave him a hug. It was very sweet.
Oh, that's so nice.
And then also the crowd surfing when he jumped into the
Yes.
McLaren. Oh, so cute. Um,
I
so
w
I
Is
was
Zach Brown getting his tattoo now?
I know, great question. It'll be another one. How many tattoo bargains is this man gonna make as well? Like
I think he made the bargain on didn't he make the bargain on Drive to Survive as well?
I think he did. I think you're
He said it
right.
was gonna be something else. So it's not gonna be like the track, it's gonna be something
Yeah.
else, I think.
Something different for
So,
Lando's first win. But
we'll see.
I'm like, do you think that this, like, just because I wonder for him, he's like, it worked with Denny Rick. I'll just continue to make tattoo bargains until I win everything I want to win.
But the problem is, I don't think he can put a date or, I wouldn't do one with Oscar because the thing is, I think Oscar's one of those people who would be like, "Bet.
Yeah,
Give it to me."
let's
Like, you
go.
said you're gonna tattoo bargain if I get my first win?
I
Let's
also
do
am
it this
like,
year.
he's just gonna have like a sleeve instead of trophies, just like a sleeve of like a
He's gonna
tattoo
have
bets.
one for he's got his Daniel one here, he's gonna have his Lando one here, his Oscar one here. When Pato Award eventually arrives, he'll do one here. Just keep going down. Bianca Bustamante.
Just going.
Just keep
It's just gonna be, like, awkwardly, like, what's the word
it'll
I'm
be
looking
like
for? Like, you know how when you're a kid and you do, like, temporary
yeah.
tattoos and you place them just, like,
Yeah.
randomly? That's how I feel like it's gonna look.
He'll be like the guy who was getting all of, Max's wins tattooed on his back. Have you
I
seen
didn't
that?
see this. No, I didn't see
I will
this.
send this to you. It's the best thing. Like, there was a guy who was getting all of Max's wins, like, the dates tattooed on his back, and they're really big, but this is Max Red Bull dominance era, and so I'm always just like, "I want the update so I can see how this looks now,
Yeah,
because
I
I don't
need
know
to
how small
see.
you would have had to have gotten, and, like, does it go down your legs now?"
Good
But I'll send
lord.
it to you. It's hilarious. But yeah, he's gonna I think Zach Brown is gonna be like that.
Yeah, I agree. I like it though. If you once you find a tried and true method, you might as well stick with it. Last couple of things that came out after the race. Charles did his entire race without water due to a malfunction with his water supply, which I thought was absolutely bonkers. Um, he said that it like on his formation lap, he pressed the button, no water came out. Obviously, what's he gonna do? Go back inside. So
Oh,
he just did the whole race, no water whatsoever.
he's a trooper for that because I don't think many people could have done that.
I need water right now. Like, we've just been sitting here
Yeah.
yapping and I need water. So I don't understand. But I'm happy for him. I'm impressed. And I also think
Same.
like it shows so much more about like how this sport is an endurance sport. Like so many people want to
Yes.
be like, "Oh, you're just driving, you're just sitting, you're basically laying down."
It's like I want you to sit in a what? How high is it? Like 60 degrees Celsius?
So I believe the temperature, I'm not sure if this is accurate to like what the temperature was in Miami, but the temperature can get as high as 60 degrees Celsius, 140 degrees Fahrenheit inside the cockpit. And then obviously they're in their race suits,
Race suits.
helmets, fireproofs underneath. Um, so it's not a comfortable ride, let's say.
No.
So that's
So
that.
power to him because I don't think many people could do that.
No, I was so impressed by that news. And there really was no way to fix it, like, they couldn't have stopped at that point, you know,
Yeah.
so it's just that's the situation. So we talked about this earlier, but just to give, like, more details, K-Mag is nearing a race ban after the post-race penalties because he got 5 points in Florida, bringing him to a total of 10.
That's such a crazy number.
Isn't that insane? Like, that's what I'm saying about the way that he was driving, it's like, for you to come out and double your penalty points in 1 weekend, maybe you should reconsider.
That might be why they're just not looking to rehire him because if you can do that in one weekend, what can you do?
Like a whole season. His next points don't fall off until March 9th of 2025. So,
He's got a long way to go.
yeah, so that's it's not good news. Um, and so we've got that. We also just like for reference, and again with that crash that we almost saw from Checo, could have been close to a race ban for him as well. Um, And I am intrigued to see if we do see a race ban from either team because it'll be interesting to see who they put in that seat. It's possible we would see Ollie Behrman in the Haas seat again, most likely, I think. Um,
Yeah,
since he's the reserve driver for both Haas and Ferrari, which would be interesting.
for
So
sure.
we will see. And then, okay, the last thing I do want to talk about is Max because we've been talking about this like what if in the press. In the final like press junket for the winners for the podium, we had someone ask like, do you think Lando still would have won if it weren't for the safety car? And Lando tried to like answer the question properly. He was like, I don't know, like I don't remember what my gap was. I guess it would have been pretty hard to catch up, whatever. And then Max finally cuts him off. And he's like, he literally was like, "It's always if. If my mom had balls, she would be my dad." What are we talking about? Like, he literally was just like, "Why are we talking about this?" Like, he won the race. Sometimes racing goes well, sometimes racing goes poorly. He won. It is what it is. Like, I
I
honestly
just
thought it was funny.
I appreciate like how much they are all just together with like we are going to stand for this man and he
Yeah.
just won this race. Do not ask stupid questions like that though.
Like, stop it. Which I also think is it's honestly kind of nice to see sometimes because I think that is what I like about Max, and it's not just an isolated to Max thing, but the thing I like about Max is that he is, like, a competitor, and a true
Yeah.
competitor recognizes when you lost something outright, and
Yeah.
that's what he did this weekend. Like, he did. He lost the race, and that's what happened. There's
He
no,
did such a
like
good job.
yeah, and I thought it was nice. I don't think a lot of times because of Max's bluntness, we see a lot of, like, gracious behavior, I guess is the way I would phrase it. Um, and
Yeah.
there's nothing that says you have to be a gracious competitor, but, like, we've seen, like, the way he very bluntly talks about things. So, like, if he feels this way, then it's truly the way he feels, which I thought was nice to see.
That's true.
Um, and lastly, just to end it, they also asked him what happened with the cone, and he said, "I didn't like it." So I took it
I thought
out.
it was ugly.
Had to go. So, but yeah, so I think exciting week, exciting time. Happy for Lando, happy for the adventure. Um, do you have any predictions for next week? Because it's getting pretty unpredictable these days.
Um, I'm gonna predict a Ferrari win
Ooh,
at Imola. I
I would love to
am
see it.
because I think that Ferrari is due a win. I think Charles Leclerc is due a win,
True.
and I really also want him to get a win before the end of this season because I think that would make me very happy. I think McLaren will be very strong as well in Imola.
Yeah.
I think Mercedes is going to keep dropping off, and I think Lewis and George are going to.
I agree. I was sad to see I thought Mercedes had really good pace during the free practice session and then just completely went away after that. So I don't know that like Mercedes is ever going to be consistent again, um, which is a bummer.
I think they're having the issues that they had last year, which is like they cannot manage that car when it's at full race weight or even just moderately above like halfway.
Yeah,
Like they're just struggling every single time that you have high fuel loads. And it's just, I don't think you can fix that
I
really
agree.
easily.
I agree. I think they have too much going on and I think they're going to continue to be inconsistent, which sucks.
Yeah.
But I am excited to watch McLaren continue to compete in the way that they seem to be competing this weekend. So I think it'll be good. Well, this was wonderful. I had the best
I
time with
loved
you.
it.
Wonderful. Love
I've
it.
been always enjoyed my time here. Thank you for having me.
Of course, if people want to find you on the internet, where can they do so?
So all of my handles are same, finally. It's my first name, so Jordan, and then a period, and then Taylor C. And
Amazing.
that's it.
Well, you can find Jordan on the internet, and you'll probably see us one day meet in person, we hope, on those
We are
accounts.
going to a race together, and when we do so, it's you guys are gonna be so sick of us, but I'm gonna love it, and it's going to be the best thing.
It's
It's
gonna
gonna
be
be the
fun.
best content.
It's gonna be so good. I love it. Well, Jordan, thanks for hanging out.
Thank you for having me.
Always, if you don't want to watch these races alone, you can join the actual grid chat. I host a group chat of motorsports fans where fan behavior is encouraged, and there's no such thing as a stupid question. We watch these races live together, chat about breaking news, and of course, send each other an unhealthy amount of memes. If you'd like to join the grid chat, you can do so at tandemproductions.com/grid chat. There will also be a link to that in the episode description. Once you fill out the form on the webpage there, you'll get an invite via email from me. If you want to connect, let me know what you thought about the episode, or even just ask me another question that you'd like me to cover on the show. You can find me on all social media platforms at Marissa Kamari. And one of the best ways to connect with me is if you're listening to this podcast on Herd FM. You can find me in the community section on Herd FM, where my username is just my first name, Marissa. And once we follow each other, after every episode that you listen to, I'll be able to comment and have a conversation with you directly. So again, my username on Herd FM is Marissa. As always, I've been your host, Marissa Tandon, and thank you for joining the Grid Chat.